Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin my presentation by saying that COVID-19 amplifies challenges for company directors. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Dania Binti Kahar, and today I am representing Ghazali Shafi'i Graduate School of Government from University Utara Malaysia, UUM. Today, I will be addressing the company director's dilemma during the pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, as you have known, the world today have been impacted badly by the devastating outbreak of COVID-19, which led the global government to impose the movement control order known as the MCO in order to halt the spread of the virus. This MCO has been functioning like a double-edged sword, where beneficially it helps the health sectors to reduce the number of COVID-19 cases. And in the same time, it actually has disrupted the flows of businesses and it eventually plunged the global economy. This is because people and goods are businesses' lifeblood. So economically, the MCO had led to an increasing number of unemployment, which led to the household income have been reduced, poverty increased. We also suffer Malaysian currency depreciation. We have also suffered strain in supply chain, liquidity concern, and financial constraint. So when all of these added up, it actually led to societal pressure. So how does companies and directors are affected directly by the MCO? Firstly, when the government actually imposed movement control order, people from the non-essential companies needed to work from remotely from home. So this implied the first challenge, which is the challenge of working remotely from home. What is actually the challenge? The challenge is when some people might find the inability to adapt to new technology. And directors often they need to provide a new system for their companies to work operatively from home, and in the same time they need to monitor and oversight their employees' performance even when they are working at their different houses. So secondly, it involves the flow of global supply and demand, where the global supply and demand was actually disturbed. How? We can see there are increased demand for groceries, for example. But what about the companies that deal with tourism and transportation? These companies, this type of service companies, this demand for this kind of services companies actually evaporate during the time of the pandemic because people are restricted to travel. And what about the common companies? So most of these common companies actually experience supply constraint, where some of the supply that they are needed to operate, some of the supplies that they needed to operate some of the supplies that they needed seems to be received in delay, and some of the supplies cannot be fulfilled due to the workers that produce the supply cannot work. And due to this, company projects and demands are delayed and cancelled. So when company project and demands are delayed and cancelled, companies need to anticipate decrease in revenues, which lead to the loss of profit. So what by then, the companies are facing the risk of worsening living condition, where the employers and employees are bothly impacted by stress and rising burden of work along with the economic stagnation. So, hence, at this pivotal moment and a new set of pressure with a few options to maximize revenue and profit, directors are actually inquired to make difficult decisions. This decision will be a critical factor that will determine whether this company can actually sustain and have the ability to emerge from the impact of the crisis and push company forward economically, or whether this company cannot sustain. So, why do I say that this is a quest for integrity? For me, the quest for integrity in business, especially among directors, is not only a reaction against malfeasance in business or associated calls for reform, but rather the quest for integrity involves the search for stems, for changes to new demands that exist in the global businesses environment as well as the latest economic crisis. So who is actually the directors? Directors can be any person who occupy the position of a directors of a company by whatever name they are called. Sometimes they are known as CEO, COO, CFO, and sometimes they are known as the directors themselves. So who give these directors the power to manage and organize these companies? So according to Section 211 CA 2016, these directors are given the power to manage, organize and supervise this company by the Companies Act 2016 or the company constitution itself. So when the board has all this powerful manage, direct, supervise these businesses, this company, this management, and the affairs of the company, they are subjected to the modification and the limitation that is contained in the constitution itself. Are a crucial organ for a company. They are the intermediary person that deal with the shareholders and the managers. They are the person that legally responsible for setting this company's strategic decision, strategic directions, and they are the person that will ensure that this company will have an efficient long-term performance and they can sustain in these dark times. Directors are a person that plays an important role. They are the advisor, they are the company advisor, they are the person that will contribute to strategic decisions and policy planning based on the information that they have obtained, the expertise that they have, and the wisdom that they acquired from the years of experience. So these directors are responsible for facilitating the company to acquire various resources to bring additional value to the company through their networking capacities. So legally, the Companies Act 2016 highlight that the director have two duties. When these directors have that sort of power, that big amount of power where they can manage and organize a big company, and they have the responsibility to, provide business decisions, strategic planning, and whatsoever. They have the duties that has been highlighted in the Companies Act 2016, which are the fiduciary duties and the duty of care, skills, and diligence. So what is fiduciary duties? Fiduciary duty is when the directors have fiduciary relationship with the company. So when the directors are acting or trying to provide a business judgment, they need to act and provide the decision bona fide in the interest of the company. Secondly, they need to exercise their power for a proper purpose and they need to retain discretion. And most importantly, these directors need to avoid conflict of interest. And of course, they need to act with care, skills, and diligence. So as we have mentioned, the swift and massive shock caused by the pandemic caused global economy to plunge, which placed extraordinary demand toward the directors because these directors need to face the impact of strain, supply chain, liquidity concern, financial strain, and the challenge of operating their business remotely from home. So this impact actually intensifies the scrutiny of the decision that needed to be made by the directors in order to strike the right balance between fulfilling their oversight responsibilities and allowing management to run daily operations. So in this pandemic, the directors are often torn between two parties, which is the company itself and the society. Why? Because the society have high expectation that these big companies can actually provide societal engagement or provide corporate social responsibility to help the society to ease their suffering, especially during this pandemic time. But in the same time, this director also need to act or provide decision that can help the companies to sustain in these dark times. From my research, there are four main dilemmas that often faced by directors, that mainly faced by directors, especially during the pandemic, which are the dilemma of corporate governance, the dilemma of insolvency, the dilemma of business judgment, and the ethical dilemma. There are three core issues that needed to be emphasized in the dilemma of corporate governance, which are: the first issue is the dilemma of maintaining corporate governance itself. Secondly is to maintain the sustainability of the company itself. And thirdly is to maintain financial transparency in financial reporting. So Datuk Said Zaid Albar said that there is a strong need for good corporate governance and board leadership, especially when the companies are trying to navigate their ways during this prolonged post-pandemic recovery. And Jillian Ng, the Senior Director of Corporate Governance, provide a brief explanation what is actually the dilemma that the director face in order to maintain the governance, which is in order for these directors to face this new normal, these directors need to face these directors need to understand the future work. They need to plan for a new emerging risk. They need to stay ahead of the curve. They need to enforce clause measures. They need to understand the cybersecurity concerns of working from home. And by then, they also need to provide assisting management in addressing crisis-related issues. Directors, when they are trying to maintain sustainability, they need to have strategies. They need to have the composition in upholding their business model to ramp up the company preparation in order to ensure that this company will remain sustainable in this volatile time. So in order for these directors to maintain sustainability for their companies, they need to perform monitoring tasks, hold up meetings and discussion. They need to give support in management risk. They need to provide business continuity plan. But these tasks, however, has actually been challenged continuously as the pandemic daily imposed new risks and continue to evolve rapidly and unpredictably. Why? Because you can see when during the pandemic, the government keep on updating new news, new policies that is required by the company in order for them to uphold, in order to maintain sustainability. But these policies keep changing from time to time. So these directors have the obligation to follow through all the they need to follow through the progressive policies that have been enforced by the governments in order for them to involve, in order for them to provide internal policies itself. Directors are also responsible for corporate risk-taking. They need to ensure that the risk management policies and procedures that is designed are implemented by the company's senior executive and risk manager are consistent with the company's strategy and risk appetite. But the pandemic, however, imposed complexities, which is the challenge of remote of work, challenge in firm practices, technology, internal control, and forecasting. These continuous complexities actually give ample opportunities for these directors to, falsely, that it gives ample opportunities for this director to have the potential to abuse financial reporting. So you can see that during Ben Ledler, a financial analyst, he is also an auditor. He said that the coronavirus is inflecting accounting statement, where he emphasized due to the pandemic, there is a potentiality for financial reporting abuse. This is because some companies or the directors of the companies might have taken this pandemic as the opportunity to report and hide large one-time non-cash write-off or losses from bad business decisions, such as unprofitable mergers, obsolete product lines, and many more. You can see that the Malaysian government address this issue where they provide a new amended MCCG, which is known as the MCCG 2021, where in this new MCCG 2021, there are few updates on policies and practices relating to the board selection and nominations of directors. This MCCG 2021 also emphasized the role of the board in practicing oversight and incorporate sustainability in the company's operations. And they also provide practices for company with low level of compliance. So for the dilemma of insolvency, I managed to find three main dilemmas that is faced by the directors. So generally, under the common law and the statutes, if the directors are serving healthy and solvent companies, the director's fiduciary duties lies within the company best interest, right? But what about when the directors are serving a non-healthy and insolvent companies? What about that? So As the pandemic occurs, when the restriction order had forced most of the non-essential business to temporarily close and scale back their operations, this somehow lead to financial distress among companies. As the consequence, some companies might cater for insolvency. So this lead to the question where if the companies are in the process of becoming insolvent or have been declared insolvent, to whom does this company directors are owing their fiduciary duties? These are actually one major dilemmas that the company directors are facing during the pandemic. So according to the case of CIMB Bank versus Jaring Communications in Berhad, when the company become insolvent or unable to pay the debt, directors are required to exercise their power in prioritizing the interests of the company that creditors. But bear in mind, this scenario only can happen when only the creditors have the residual interest in the remaining assets of the company and not the shareholders or any third parties. So by then, creditors can so by then the directors need to act in the creditors' best interest. So the next question in the dilemma of insolvency is, when the company become insolvent, do the directors' fiduciary duties change? Well, specifically, the directors' fiduciary duties do not change, but they need to work on but in this time, the company best interest mean the creditors' best interest. Bear in mind with this scenario where it can only happen when only the creditors have the residual interest in the remaining assets. So no, the director's fiduciary duties do not change even when the company is near insolvency. Another question that is raised is whether the creditors have the right to assert that the claim that the directors have breached the fiduciary duties. Well, yes, the creditors do have yes, it is possible for creditors to sue the directors for breach of duties, especially when the companies are facing insolvency. But in order for the creditors to to allegedly accuse the directors for breach of duties, these creditors must prove that the director failed to take any reasonable step to minimize the creditors' loss. Thirdly is the dilemma of business judgment. So generally, directors have the duty of care, skills, and diligence, which require the directors to make informed and deliberative decisions based on all the information that they have reasonably obtained. So the pandemic, however, has imposed deliberate change where these directors need to face unprecedented challenges, and they need to make quick decisions to ensure that their company survive through uncharted waters. So these directors need to take the risk by providing business judgment, and they must believe that this business judgment is in the interest of the company. So, but as directors, they will surely be concerned. There will surely be concerns about the consequence of the business judgment that was made by them. What happens if the decision that is made by them will eventually cause major loss for the company? Are they personally liable for their decision? Well, according to business judgment rule, they are not liable for their decision if and only if these directors manage to fulfill four criteria that have been listed in the Section 214 Companies Act 2016. In this provision, the directors highlight to make this business judgment for a proper purpose and in good faith. These directors must also not have any material personal interest. They need to have informed knowledge on the subject matter of the judgment to the extent that these directors believe that the information that they have obtained to make this decision is reasonably appropriate under such circumstances. And last but not least, they must reasonably believe that the business judgment that is provided is in the company best interest. If this director manage to prove all these requirements are fulfilled, so this director will not be personally liable for their decision, despite the decision that may cause aggravate harms to the companies. Last but not least is the ethical dilemma. The ethical dilemma. This is the most common dilemma that is faced by the directors, where, according to Deloitte 2020, the COVID-19 crisis is emerging as a test of business commitment to upholding human rights. It means that these businesses need to be committed to uphold human rights. The WHO reported that there are 10 millions of people are risking falling into extreme poverty. In their statement, millions of enterprises face an existential threat. Nearly half of the global workforces are at risk of losing their livelihood. Informal economy workers are particularly vulnerable because the majority lack social protection and access to quality health care and have lost access to productive assets. Without the means to earn an income during these lockdowns, many are unable to feed themselves and their family. For most, no income means no food, or at best, less food, less nutritious food. As the company decision makers, these directors actually face two issues, which is the dilemma of insolvency and the dilemma of working in the human rights. So when the company is facing insolvency, for example, it is in the hand of the directors to make the decision that they believe fit in sustaining their company. They need to sustain the company. Thus, due to the limited revenue that can be generated by the company to continue its operation, this director need to save costs. How? This director need to come up with strategic planning where in some cases, if the company have several resources, the company directors can use these resources to modify the company ways of operation. But for the less fortunate companies, they might need to scale back their operations. Or for some cases, when the company lost their resources, this company might need to cease the operation. So this second dilemma is where the director need to battle with the risk of jeopardizing humanity for the sake of company's continuity. Even as the companies are fighting for survival, the board of directors are simultaneously forced to grapple with the question of public responsibility. Like I mentioned before, these directors need to ensure that the company sustain during this volatile time, but in the same time, they need to they are forced to grapple, they are forced to act for the sake of humanity. So the pandemic had placed extraordinary demand for these directors, where these directors need to battle within themselves, jeopardizing their own humanity for the toll of company continuity and sustainability. So it is famously known that directors owes the company fiduciary duties. So the directors have fiduciary relationship with the companies, not the customers or the other civil society. But by then, when this happens, directors may need to lay off certain employees. And this is the reason for the increasing of unemployment. So you can see in 2020, the unemployment rate increased from 3.2% to 5.3% in May, which explain the negative trend of the Malaysian labor demand last year. So directors need to make decision to lay off their employees, despite knowing that the employees might lose their only source of income and at the risk of losing their livelihood. It is actually very challenging for this director to bear the result of this decision. But they have fiduciary relationship, they have fiduciary responsibilities in order to ensure that this company will sustain in these volatile times. So thus it is undoubtedly due to these unfortunate events, both directors and employees are facing disorientation for losing control and emotional disturbance. According to McKinsey, there are a way to address this dilemma, which is the first way is to provide to follow the concept of five behavior and accompanying mindset, which is the directors need to organize to respond to crises. The directors need to elevate leaders during the crisis. The directors need to make decisions amid certainties, demonstrate empathies, and communicating effectively. Also emphasize on crisis management, where directors need to install crisis management and they need to increase oversight. This the recommendation that is provided by EY, where EY addressed this issue by highlighting the concept of corporate governance, where they emphasize on the focus area that can be used to balance the short-term imperative and the long-term objective. So by then, we need to have attribute, risk, reward, engagement strategy, and we need to do disclosure on the company. The directors need to disclose the company progress, long-term values, and key performance with clear accountability. The World Economic Forum addressed this dilemma by integrating corporate governance with 6 leadership priorities, which is directors need to align strategy and capital allocation with drivers of long-term value creation, internalize macro environment, strengthen preparedness and resilience to the crisis and systematic shocks, engage the company with cooperative efforts to strengthen its operative environment, and prepare the company's mainstream reporting in an integrated manner. And the directors also need to adapt the board's organization, compositions, and engagement to this imperative. So for conclusion, directors are actually encouraged to inculcate the value of integrity, trust, and agility and responsibility among themselves and their employees. This is the process of communicating core values. So communicating corporate values is one of the crucial steps, as it helps to promote compliance and accountability among directors and employees personally and professionally, especially when they are carrying their duties. Directors are recommended to provide virtual training, awareness-raising activities, and digital communication to instill these values. By then, when directors and employees are facing critical situation, this value will be the core guiding values that will help them to overcome the situation. So to conclude, I, as the researcher or the writers of this article, believe that during this pandemic, directors need to be open to the idea of restructuring companies' corporate governance and communicating cores. Thank you.